Historical events in focus. 2. The Empire of Alexander the Great. The Complete History. Part 1. The story of Alexander the Great is one of the most fascinating in ancient Greece. This young king conquered much of the known world in his day and left a legacy that lives on today. We will explore the life and conquests of Alexander the Great, from his childhood to his death. After that brief introduction, let's get started. Who was Alexander the Great? Alexander III of Macedon, known as Alexander the Great or Alexander the Great, was an ancient Greek king and conqueror who lived between 356 BC and 323 BC. The son of King Philip II of Macedonia and Olympias of Epirus, Alexander became king of Macedonia in 336 BC. After the murder of his father. Throughout his reign, Alexander carried out a series of military conquests that led him to extend the Macedonian Empire from Greece to India, becoming one of the greatest conquerors in history. In addition to his military achievements, Alexander was also a great promoter of Hellenistic culture, spreading the Greek language and the philosophical and scientific ideas of ancient Greece throughout the known world in his day. Alexander the Great was the son of Philip II, who was the king of Macedonia, belonging to the dynasty of the Argeadas. His mother was Olympia, daughter of Neoptolemus I of Epirus. According to Plutarch's account, the day of his birth in the capital, 3 victories were celebrated: that of Parmenion, his father's general, over the Illyrians, his father's victory in the siege of a port city, and the victory of the king's chariot in a competition. Although some considered these omens incredible at the time, some argue that they may have been later inventions to magnify Alexander's figure. There are several versions about the paternity of Alexander the Great. Some historians question whether Philip II, the Macedonian king, was her real father. There is a legend that tells that his mother, Olympias, dreamed that lightning struck her belly before she became pregnant, and that Philip II dreamed that his wife had her abdomen sealed with the image of a lion, which led to accusing her of adultery. There is also another legendary version that links Alexander to the Egyptian pharaoh Nectanebo II, who would have visited Philip's court as a magician. This story relates to the belief that Alexander was linked to the god Ammonius and his subsequent visit to the oracle. However, these stories do not have a proven historical basis. According to a completely legendary legend, Alexander the Great would be linked to the god Ammonius and his real father, the Egyptian pharaoh Nectanebo II, who took refuge in Greece after his country was invaded by the Persians. According to the story, Nectanebo II was received at Philip's court as a magician. Personified as the god Ammon, he convinced Olympias to father a son who would save the 2 nations. According to Callisthenes, Alexander learned that his real father was Nectanebo II on a night walk, and pushed him into a well and died. This legend is based on the fact that the Egyptian priests of the oracle of Ammonius in Siwa greeted him as the son of that god, a title that implied recognizing him as pharaoh. Alexander the Great received a complete education that included both physical and intellectual education. His father, Philip II, hired teachers to teach him everything necessary to be a great leader and warrior. Among her teachers were Leonidas, who taught her to be strong and resilient, and Aristotle, who taught her about philosophy and science. At the age of 16, Alexander became regent of Macedonia and had to face an armed insurrection. Despite Aristotle's opposition, he decided to fight because he considered his youth and daring to be his greatest asset. His father's marriage to a new wife, which could threaten his right to the throne, led Alexander to fall out with him. During the wedding, Philip's father-in-law asked the king for a legitimate heir, suggesting that Alexander's mother was not a Macedonian and therefore his succession was not guaranteed. Alejandro got angry and threw a drink, insulting his father. As a result, he was exiled along with his mother to Epirus. Philip also ordered the exile of all of Alexander's close friends, though he eventually forgave him. After Philip's assassination in 336 BC by Pausanias, a captain of his guard, Alexander became the new ruler of Macedonia at the age of 20. His ascension to the throne was not easy, as he had to deal with conspiracies and eliminate possible rival heirs. Once in power, Alexander found himself with a kingdom transformed. Macedonia had gone from being an inconspicuous frontier country in Hellas to a powerful military state, with consolidated borders and an experienced army. In addition, Macedonia exerted influence over Greece through the League of Corinth, which gave it indirect power over the Greek city-states. According to a speech attributed to Alexander the Great by the historian Flavio Arriano, the Macedonian people were radically transformed thanks to the reign of Philip II. Before their arrival, they were a poor and nomadic people, clad in sheepskins and herding small flocks in the mountains. Its defense capacity was limited against the neighboring barbarian tribes. However, Philip II provided them with better clothing and led them from the mountains to the plains, where they were able to face their enemies through their own courage and fighting skills rather than relying on fortifications. In addition, Philip II turned them into city dwellers and civilized them through excellent laws and good customs. After Philip II's death, Alexander the Great faced resistance from some Greek cities that had been under his father's rule. These cities saw an opportunity to revolt due to the apparent weakness of the Macedonian monarchy. To secure his position and guarantee control over these cities, Alexander had to take swift and decisive action. In the spring of 335 BC, Alexander undertook a successful military campaign to the north, conquering the regions of Illyria, corresponding to present-day Albania and North Macedonia, and Thrace, up to the vicinity of the Danube River, in present-day Romania. However, during this campaign, he received news that the city of Thebes had risen in revolt and seized control of a Macedonian garrison. This challenge by Thebes was an early test for Alexander, who quickly reacted and marched south to put down the rebellion. Alexander's response was blunt and brutal. He took the city by force, destroyed much of it, and massacred its inhabitants as a warning to other cities that might consider resistance. This action served to establish his authority and deter future uprisings against him. Discover history in an entertaining and fascinating way. Subscribe to our channel Wolf Culturalit. Join us on an exciting journey through time and space as we explore the secrets and mysteries of the past. Don't miss any of our updates and share it with your friends so they can join in on the fun too. Alexander's campaign north and his subsequent handling of the rebellion in Thebes demonstrated his determination and military skill, laying the foundation for his ambitious plan to conquer the Persian Empire. They also allowed him to recruit mercenaries from the Greek cities for his army, adding forces and resources for the future campaign against Persia. Alexander the Great demonstrated his strategic and military skill by quickly reacting to the Theban rebellion and securing his dominance in the region. After traveling almost 600 kilometers to Thessaly to consolidate his authority in that region previously conquered by his father, Philip II, he headed for Attica to confront the Theban uprising. Theban resistance was fierce and the city put up a tenacious defense, prompting Alexander to take drastic measures. The city was reduced to rubble, with the exception of the house that had belonged to the poet Pindar. Alejandro executed the rebels and then interviewed part of the population. Although the city suffered the consequences of his rebellion, Alexander later ordered its reconstruction as a show of clemency and to restore order. On his way south to Attica, Alexander visited the famous oracle at Delphi, where an Athenian general had removed the temple Pythoness. Alexander reinstated the Pythoness in her position and consulted the oracle twice. On the first visit, there were certain incidents and the priests had to intervene to maintain order. Alejandro sought out the oracle and, after a struggle with the fortune teller, she told him, "My son, you are invincible," which strengthened his confidence and determination. These events show Alexander's determination to secure his authority and restore order to regions that had challenged his leadership. In addition, they demonstrate their interest in religion and the search for divine approval for their future military ventures. After suppressing the uprising in Thebes, Alexander traveled south from Attica and reached Athens, where the citizens closed the doors due to the fear they had felt for what happened in Thebes. However, Alexander showed respect for the culture and philosophy of the city and proposed to enter without his army, which allowed the city to recognize him as hegemon and thus consolidate Macedonian hegemony. During his visit to the Isthmian Games in Corinth, Alexander met the philosopher Diogenes of Sinope, who was sitting on a barrel. Alexander asked him if he could do something for him, to which Diogenes responded ironically. Struck by the response, Alexander praised Diogenes' eloquence and expressed his desire to be like him if he were not Alexander. On another occasion, Alexander found Diogenes rummaging through garbage and asked him what he was looking for, to which Diogenes responded with a derogatory comment about the bones of slaves and those of his father. Despite this, Alexander never retaliated against Diogenes. Conquers Asia Minor. After ensuring stability in the Hellas region and southeastern Europe, Alexander entrusted the government of those territories to Antipater and prepared to undertake the conquest of the Persian Empire. With an army of about 40,000 soldiers, including Greek allies and mercenaries, and a fleet of 160 ships, Alexander crossed the Hellespont into Asia Minor. His main goal was to liberate the Greek polis cities in the Ionia region, which were under Persian rule at the time. During his journey, Alexander made a brief stop in Troy, where he paid homage at the tomb of Achilles, the famous hero of the Trojan War. This act symbolized his connection to Greek history and tradition, and strengthened his determination to carry out his military campaign in Persian lands. Battle of the Granicus River. In the first battle to take place on Asian soil, the Battle of the Granicus, Alexander faced a Persian army led by Memnon of Rhodes, who had a similar number of soldiers as the Hellenes. The vanguard of the Persian army consisted mainly of Persians, while the rear guard consisted of Greek mercenaries. Despite weak resistance from the Persian army, there was a rear-ended assassination attempt on Alexander by a Persian. However, Clito, a confidant of his father Philip, managed to kill the enemy and save Alexander's life. Occupation of Ephesus, Halicarnassus, Pergamus, and Miletus. Memnon, a Greek mercenary general in the service of Persia, played a significant role during Alexander's invasion of Asia. He had vast domains in the Trojan area and was familiar with Alexander and Aristotle from his stay in Macedonia during the Persian invasion. Memnon used a sizable fleet to attack Alexander's supply lines through the Hellespont and the Aegean Islands. He received reinforcements from Cyprus, Phoenicia, and Egypt, and managed to embarrass Alexander with his military tactics. However, the death of Memnon during the siege of Mytilene ended the maritime threat. With Memnon gone, the naval pressure eased and Alexander gained control of the Aegean Sea. Taking advantage of this situation, he decided to pause in Ionia, which had been returned to the Greeks without the Persian threat. During his stay there, he had the opportunity to meet the famous painter Pelas. Massive weddings and concubines. Alexander was very passionate about the arts and had a great interest in controlling the representation of his image, which is why he only authorized 3 artists to do so, including the famous painter Pelas. Alejandro frequently visited his workshop and submitted to his demands. Apelles used to paint Alexander and his concubine Campaspe, who was also a model for the representation of the goddess Aphrodite. After the first stage of conquests, mass weddings were held between the Greek soldiers and women from the liberated polis cities. In the autumn of 334 BC, Alexander sent these newlywed soldiers to Macedonia to spend the winter with their wives, and Cenas, one of his ablest commanders, took them back to Greece. Towards the end of 334 BC, Alexander decided to spend the winter in Gordion, the ancient capital of Phrygia located in central Turkey, while he waited for reinforcements. During his stay there, he found a famous royal chariot with a very complicated knot that, according to the local oracle, could only be untied by the conqueror of Asia. Some sources indicate that Alexander patiently untied the knot, while others claim that he cut it with his sword. In any case, a storm that followed the event was interpreted as a sign of approval from Zeus. Meanwhile, Caenis returned from Greece with reinforcements, including newlywed Macedonian soldiers and new recruits, to meet Alexander at Gordion. To be continued. Thank you for your interest in culture and knowledge. I hope the information I provided you has been useful and interesting. If you want to continue learning and exploring, we invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel Wolf Culturalit for more educational and entertaining content. See you soon!